Greetings and welcome to the Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismantle pop culture in all its forms. There are quite a few things going on in the world of pop culture this week, so I felt it was time to do another weekly wrap-up, our series where we look at the news without exerting too much effort. Today we'll be discussing Paul Thomas Anderson's latest swing for the fences may end up being more of a bunt, with a divisive one battle after another. So get ready to read the news with us on this edition of the Weekly Wrap-Up. Before we begin, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and help us grow the channel. As always, it really means a lot to us. And don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoy the content. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. And finally, let's talk about one of the more divisive movies to hit theaters this week. I'm talking about One Battle After Another, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson and starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Sean Penn. This is one of the most talked about movies in a long time. Universally anticipated and praised by the mainstream/access media, it's supposed to be a huge hit by one of Hollywood's most beloved filmmakers, starring two of Hollywood's most beloved actors. But could it ever live up to the hype? So, One Battle is an action comedy thriller loosely inspired by the 1990 novel Vineland by Thomas Pynchon. DiCaprio stars as a washed-up former revolutionary who has to get his group of former radicals together to rescue his daughter after she's kidnapped by Sean Penn's character, who is trying to get inducted into some kind of white supremacy group or something. I don't know. It blends screwball humor and thrilling action sequences with lots of heavy-handed commentary on subjects such as radicalism and authoritarianism. Undoubtedly, the movie has style, shot in VistaVision for stunning visuals, with the car chase scenes being singled out even by the harshest critics, as well as good performances by the cast, especially DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro. But it also suffers from rather divisive subtext, with some calling it a thinly veiled allegory for Antifa, with the white supremacist Sean Penn being a stand-in for right-wing opposition. Multiple critics have drawn attention to the way the movie portrays a fictional militant group called French 75. Their tactics, bombings, bank raids, jailbreaks, echo the playbook of left-wing urban insurgencies from the 20th century. And reviewers aren't shy about labeling it. Hollywood in toto argued the film, quote, casts an Antifa-style group as its heroes, while the San Francisco Chronicle described the film, referring to the protagonist as, quote, an allegory that involves Antifa-like left-wing extremists, a well-funded right-wing militia group, and immigrants avoiding ICE. Now, the Daily Beast went further, calling it a, quote, gonzo Antifa rallying cry. Even positive reviews celebrated it as a radical story of, quote, modern-day Antifa revolutionaries. So while the film doesn't use the word Antifa in its script, the parallels are obvious enough that critics across the spectrum are applying the label. Why it matters? Hollywood frequently embraces political causes on screen, but rarely does it glorify violent revolutionaries as sympathetic protagonists. That's why the, quote, Antifa movie framing has caught fire. It crystallizes what many moviegoers already suspect about the industry, that it's willing to romanticize chaos so long as the ideology leans left. And I don't know. I haven't seen the movie, so I can't make any pronouncements on the merits of any of the criticism, or praise for that matter. I can say that, based on what I have seen and heard, the timing of the movie is probably not great. It may have been a lot less divisive, say 20 years ago, but with all the political turmoil and division in American politics since about 2015, which has been amplified with political violence more recently, I can understand why some people might be reacting to it. But none of that is the reason for this video. Today, I just want to talk about the numbers and ask questions about why it was made in the first place. First, let's talk about Paul Thomas Anderson. One of several high-profile filmmakers that came out of the 1990s golden age of Sundance Film Festival, along with such names as Quentin Tarantino, James Wan, and Kevin Smith. Anderson's first movie, Hard Eight, premiered at Sundance in 1996, and the festival helped elevate him as a rising star. Beginning in 1997, Anderson had several critical successes in a row, including Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and Punch Drunk Love. They were followed by his most acclaimed, and his previous highest grossing, we'll come back to that in a minute, There Will Be Blood in 2007, widely regarded as one of the greatest films of the 21st century. The Master, Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, and Licorice Pizza followed, again, all scoring well in critical reviews. Critics love Paul Thomas Anderson. He is a stylistic filmmaker, making use of bold visuals with constantly moving cameras and long takes. Most of his work is characterized by depictions of desperate characters and explorations of alienation, loneliness, and redemption. He is a filmmaker's filmmaker, an artist of the medium, and is celebrated for the depth of his work. But one thing he's not, and never has been, is a blockbuster film director. Paul Thomas Anderson is not known as a profitable filmmaker. He takes mostly modest budget films and enjoys an even more modest box office in practically every movie he's ever made. In fact, with the exception of Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood, every movie Paul Thomas Anderson has directed has lost money. Magnolia, admittedly a great movie, made about $48 million on a $37 million budget, which means it lost money. Punch Drunk Love made $24 million on a $25 million budget. The Master made $28 million on a $32 million budget. Inherent Vice, $15 million on a $20 million budget. Phantom Thread, $52 million on a $35 million budget, which still is a loss of money. And Licorice Pizza made $33 million on a $40 million budget. So he loses an average of at least $10 million per movie. But see, that's okay, because Paul Thomas Anderson makes movies that critics and academies love. The kind that bring prestige to movie studios and maybe some awards, and they therefore bring value to those companies. So it's worth giving Paul Thomas Anderson a $30 or $40 million budget to make high-value art for the company, since the worst a studio can expect is a modest loss, and occasionally, twice in his career, he even turns a little profit. But then comes one battle after another. Up to this point, the highest budget Paul Thomas Anderson has ever been given is $40 million for Licorice Pizza, and he ended up losing the studio over $20 million on that one, which is also the most money he's ever lost a studio. Inexplicably then, the reported production budget on One Battle After Another is at least $130 million, with another $70 million in marketing. That puts the break-even of this movie at $300 to $400 million. What? Why? Well, before we get to those questions, let's take a look at how it's doing, shall we? So Leonardo DiCaprio's Antifa movie, One Battle After Another, flopped at the box office despite Hollywood media spin. So Leo DiCaprio is used to being called a box office sure thing. His name, combined with director Paul Thomas Anderson, was supposed to deliver a prestige box office hit with One Battle After Another. Instead, the film has stumbled out of the gate with an opening that exposes just how desperate Hollywood media can be to put lipstick on a flop. The numbers don't lie, even if the press is trying to massage them. So over its opening weekend, One Battle After Another managed $22 million domestically and $48 million worldwide. On paper, that was good enough for a number one debut, but context is everything. Like we said, the production budget, $130 plus million, marketing budget at least $70 million. So the break-even target, it says $300 million, but if you take the production budget and marketing budget together, that's a $200 million budget. And since the studio only gets about 50% of tickets, it would seem like the break-even is more like $400 million. But let's say it's $300 million. That's a steep mountain for a film that can't even crack $25 million in North America on its opening weekend. For comparison, other prestige blockbusters like Napoleon opened higher and still ended up in financial quicksand. Put bluntly, One Battle After Another looks poised to lose money. If you read Variety or the major newspapers, you might think the picture is rosier than it really is. The LA Times ran with the headline, One Battle After Another lands solidly at the box office with a $22 million debut. New York Times described sales as, quote, solid with an asterisk, and conceded profitability remains a big question. Variety chose to say the film, quote, landed solidly, despite calling it Anderson's most expensive project ever. Notice the word of the weekend, solid. It's a choice designed to reassure, even though every financial reality points in the opposite direction. A $22 million domestic launch on a $200 million plus spend is not solid, it's shaky. However, the movie has gotten good word of mouth and has some pretty impressive legs with a good hold so far. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another had a fantastic hold in the sophomore session, dropping only 22% at the international box office. The Warner Brothers title added $21 million in 77 overseas markets this weekend to lift the international running cume to $58.9 million, with global sales passing the century mark to reach 101 million through Sunday. So yeah, it had a good hold for its second and third weekends, so that it actually has broken $100 million worldwide as of the writing of this article. It's already clear that this is the best performing movie of Paul Thomas Anderson's career. It's already brought in over $100 million at the box office and will likely add more to that number in the coming weeks. But what's also equally clear is that this thing isn't going to come anywhere near the break-even, and it will almost certainly lose more money than Paul Thomas Anderson has ever lost before. But what seems just as clear to me is that the studio and Paul Thomas Anderson and anyone who had any input whatsoever in greenlighting this thing also should have known that this movie was going to lose a lot of money. Because even if this thing makes another $100 million, which it almost certainly won't, it'll still lose almost $100 million. And that's a big loss. I can see the wisdom in taking a $10 to $20 million loss occasionally to get a critically acclaimed art film with your studio's name on it, but $100 million? That seems excessive even to the grotesquely wealthy Hollywood elites. And it had to be expected. Hell, they should have expected it to lose even more than that, based on Paul Thomas Anderson's history. This thing is an absolute runaway success for Paul Thomas Anderson, and it's still going to lose $100 million. In other words, it was guaranteed to lose at least this much. So again, I have to ask, why? Why did they approve this project? Was there some ulterior motive? Is there some dark money being fed into the studios to produce projects like this, even ones destined to fail fantastically? And those questions seem even more sinister when considering the subject matter and divisive nature of this particular film. Don't they? Now, I'm not saying it's paid propaganda, but it sure seems like paid propaganda. But what do I know? I'm just a dumb guy on YouTube asking dumb questions, right? What do you think? Do you think Paul Thomas Anderson ever even had a chance of turning a profit on one battle after another? Why do you think they gave him such a big budget anyway? Join the conversation in the comments below. And that brings us to the end of another installment of the weekly wrap-up here in the Culture Ward. What did you think of the news stories? Are there other stories that we missed or ones that you want us to delve into next time? Let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye for now. We hope to see you next time in the Culture Ward.